My name is Jack, and for the last 7 years, I have been living what most people would call a dream life. My wife Amanda and I resided in a picturesque suburban neighborhood, tucked away from the noise and chaos of the city. Our house, a large two-story home with a wide front yard and meticulously trimmed hedges, was a symbol of the life we had built together. The white picket fence surrounding the property gave the illusion of security, as if it could keep any problem or disruption at bay. From the outside, our lives seemed perfectly aligned with the idyllic image of suburban bliss. The mornings were my favorite part of the day. I would wake up to the scent of fresh coffee drifting through the house, sunlight pouring in through the tall windows that lined the living room. Our mornings were quiet and peaceful. I would sit on the back porch with a mug of coffee in my hand, watching the dew evaporate from the grass while Amanda tended to the small garden she loved so much. She had a special touch with flowers, roses, tulips, lilies, they all thrived under her care. Sometimes, I'd watch her silently from the window, marveling at the way she moved with such grace and ease, as if she was perfectly at home in this quiet corner of the world we'd carved out for ourselves. Inside, the house was everything we had ever wanted. Spacious rooms with high ceilings, hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot, and a kitchen big enough to host dinner parties with friends. Which we often did. There was a warmth to our home, a sense of comfort and familiarity that made it feel like a sanctuary. The walls were adorned with photographs from our travels, mementos of the life we had shared. I remember feeling a deep sense of contentment, as if this was exactly where I was meant to be, with the person I was meant to be with. Our marriage, too, appeared to be everything one could hope for. Amanda and I had met in college, and from the moment we started dating, there was an undeniable spark between us. She was intelligent, witty, and beautiful in a way that seemed almost effortless. Her smile could light up a room, and her laugh, oh, that laugh, was contagious. People used to say we were the perfect couple, and in many ways, it felt like we were. We rarely argued, and when we did, it was over trivial things like who forgot to put the cap back on the toothpaste or whether we should repaint the living room a lighter shade of blue. Nothing ever seemed serious enough to cause a rift between us. I prided myself on being a good husband. I tried to support Amanda in everything she did, whether it was her career or her hobbies. She was an interior designer, and her eye for detail was unmatched. Clients loved her, and she always came home with stories of how she'd transformed someone's house into a home. I admired her work ethic and her passion. In many ways, she inspired me to be better and to push myself harder in my career as a financial analyst. We were both ambitious, driven by a desire to create a stable, fulfilling life for ourselves. Looking back now, it's almost painful to think about how happy I thought we were. How naive I must have been. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect couple. Our friends envied our relationship, our home, our lives. They saw the barbecues we hosted in our backyard, the vacations we took to tropical destinations, and the smiling photos we posted online. To everyone around us, it seemed like we had it all: love, stability, success. But appearances can be deceiving. I didn't know it then, but beneath the surface, things were starting to crack. There were signs, subtle at first, that something was off, but I ignored them, dismissing any nagging doubts as paranoia or overthinking. Why wouldn't I? After all, we had everything. We were happy, weren't we? I would later realize that the life I thought was perfect, the marriage I believed was unbreakable, was nothing more than a fragile facade. And like all facades, it was only a matter of time before it crumbled. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, I began to notice peculiar changes in Amanda's behavior. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, like a slight shift in the atmosphere before a storm. I would catch glimpses of her lost in thought, her gaze distant, as if she were miles away from the cozy confines of our home. It was disconcerting, a creeping unease that settled in my stomach and festered with each passing day. At first, I brushed it off. Life can get busy, perhaps she was preoccupied with work or some new project. Amanda was a talented interior designer, and I knew how demanding her clients could be. But soon, her absences became harder to ignore. She would leave the house with a casual "I'll be back in a bit" that lacked the warmth it once had. Hours would pass, and I would find myself glancing at the clock, anxiety creeping in with every tick. Where could she possibly be? When she did come home, there was an air of distraction about her. Conversations that once flowed easily became stilted, like I was trying to extract words from a stone. She would offer brief replies, her mind seemingly elsewhere. I'd ask her about her day, and while she would share a few details, there was a palpable wall between us. It was as if she was letting me in just enough to keep me from asking too many questions but not enough to feel truly connected. That coldness seeped into our relationship, and I could feel it in the space between us, an invisible chasm that I couldn't quite bridge. On some evenings, Amanda would claim she needed to run errands. And I'd nod, trying to mask my concern with a smile. I would remind myself that we were busy adults with our own lives, but it was hard to shake off the feeling that something wasn't right. As her disappearances increased, so did my worries. I started to feel like a ghost haunting my own home, watching her move through life without me, and it stung more than I cared to admit. I began to replay moments in my mind, trying to pinpoint when everything started to change. There were little signs. The way she would linger over her phone. The way she'd smile softly at a text that she quickly tucked away when I entered the room. I wanted to confront her, to ask if something was bothering her, but fear held me back. What if I was wrong? What if my suspicions were nothing but paranoia born from insecurity? The thought of accusing her of infidelity was terrifying. Then there was Mike, our neighbor. He was an amiable guy, the type who could easily charm anyone with his easygoing nature. I had known him for years, and we had shared countless barbecues in our backyards, exchanging stories over beers as we grilled up burgers. Mike was the kind of friend who would drop by to lend a hand whenever we needed it, always ready to help fix a leaky faucet or give advice on yard work. There was a camaraderie between us, a brotherly bond that made him feel like a part of our lives. But as Amanda's behavior became more erratic, my mind began to wander toward him. It was an uncomfortable thought. One I quickly dismissed at first. I trusted Amanda, I had to. Yet, every time I saw them together, whether it was a brief chat over the fence or an innocent laugh shared during one of our gatherings, my heart would clench with suspicion. Mike had always been friendly, but now there was an unsettling quality to their interactions that made me uncomfortable. It was the way she'd light up when he arrived, her laughter ringing out like a melody that seemed reserved for him alone. I'd watch from a distance, feeling like an outsider in my own life, and the more I analyzed their exchanges, the more my paranoia took root. What if there was something deeper there? I tried to rationalize my thoughts. Surely, I was overreacting. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and I could feel it growing, threatening to suffocate the happiness we had built together. I found myself obsessively replaying moments in my mind, looking for clues, for signs that would either confirm my fears or put them to rest. But with each passing day, it became harder to ignore the truth that was whispering in my ear, a nagging voice that told me to wake up and pay attention. There was a coldness that had crept into our home, and it was becoming increasingly clear that something, or someone, was coming between us. The uncertainty was maddening, and I found myself standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether to leap into the abyss or retreat into the safety of denial. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. As the days turned into weeks, the weight of suspicion began to press down on my chest like a leaden blanket. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, my emotions teetering on the edge of chaos. Each day that passed without resolution was a slow burn, and my jealousy morphed into a consuming fire that clouded my judgment. I found myself replaying every moment I had with Amanda, scrutinizing every detail of her behavior, every slight deviation from the norm. It became unbearable. The turning point came on a chilly Wednesday afternoon when I overheard her on the phone. Her voice light and airy, filled with laughter that felt foreign to me. I couldn't catch all the words, but there was an unmistakable warmth in her tone that sent a jolt of panic through me. The very next moment, she mentioned needing to go to the store. That was it. I could no longer remain passive, plagued by doubts and swirling thoughts. Fueled by a sudden surge of adrenaline, I made a snap decision. I would follow her. I needed to confront the reality of the situation, even if it shattered my world. So, when she left the house, I slipped out quietly, careful not to draw attention to my actions. My heart raced as I climbed into my car, a mix of dread and anticipation swirling within me. I was terrified of what I might discover, yet I felt an overwhelming compulsion to know the truth. As I drove, I kept my distance, allowing a reasonable gap between our cars. The streets were quiet, and the soft crunch of gravel beneath my tires seemed deafening in the silence. I kept my eyes glued to her vehicle, watching as she navigated familiar streets. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles turning white, and I could feel the sweat forming on my brow. Each turn she made felt like a twist of the knife in my gut. She finally turned down a side road, one that led to a neighborhood I knew well. A chill raced down my spine as I recognized it, the street where Mike lived. The realization hit me like a freight train. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, a storm brewing inside me as I grappled with the implications of her destination. Was she going to his house? I parked a few houses down, trying to remain inconspicuous, my heart pounding in my chest as I watched Amanda's car come to a stop outside Mike's home. The feeling was surreal, like I was a character in a poorly written drama, thrust into a scene I never wanted to play out. I sat there, frozen in disbelief, my breath hitching in my throat. She stepped out of the car, her figure silhouetted against the fading light of the day. For a moment, I felt a sense of disorientation wash over me. I had known Amanda for years, but the woman standing before me seemed like a stranger. She walked confidently to the front door and knocked, and I felt a sudden urge to turn back, to escape from the reality unfolding before me. But I couldn't. I was anchored to my seat, unable to tear my gaze away from what was about to happen. Mike opened the door, his face breaking into a smile that felt like a dagger to my heart. They exchanged words, though I couldn't hear them from my position. Their body language told a story I wasn't ready to accept, one of familiarity and ease. Of shared jokes and laughter. I felt a burning sensation in my chest, a mix of rage and heartbreak clawing at me as I watched them through the window. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe they were just friends, catching up over coffee. But deep down, I knew better. The way she leaned closer to him, the playful glint in her eyes, it was all too intimate, too familiar. And then, in a moment that felt like time standing still, I witnessed the moment that shattered my world. Amanda leaned in. And their lips met in a kiss. A wave of nausea rolled over me, and the ground felt like it was shifting beneath my feet. I couldn't breathe. The sight was surreal, each second stretching into an eternity as I absorbed the reality of the situation. This was not a moment of mere friendship, it was a betrayal that cut deeper than I could have ever imagined. I felt as if I was being hollowed out, stripped of every piece of trust and love I had for her. But instead of bursting in, demanding answers, I chose to remain hidden. A part of me wanted to confront them, to scream out the truth, to shatter the illusion of their deceit. Yet another part, the part that was still clinging to hope, urged restraint. I couldn't let my emotions dictate my actions. I needed to approach this with clarity and purpose. As they pulled away from the kiss, Amanda's face lit up with a smile that was meant for Mike alone, a smile I had longed to see directed at me. I felt my heart crack further, pieces of my soul crumbling as I realized that I was losing her to someone else. But I wouldn't make a scene. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of knowing how deeply they were hurting me. I stepped away from the window, retreating into the shadows of the night, my mind racing with questions. What would I say when I confronted her? How could I possibly express the whirlwind of emotions swirling within me? I needed to gather my thoughts, to process what I had seen before I faced her again. For now, I would keep my distance. I would be the silent witness to the unraveling of my world, biding my time until I could confront the reality that had shattered my marriage. The truth had been laid bare before me, and I knew that soon, very soon, I would have to gather the courage to face the woman I thought I knew and the painful revelations that awaited us both. As I sat in the living room, the weight of betrayal heavy on my heart, I felt the stirring of a plan begin to take shape in my mind. I didn't want to lash out in anger or confront Amanda with screaming and accusations. No, I craved something more calculated, something that would not only expose her infidelity but also illustrate the depth of my pain. I wanted revenge, but I wanted it to be served cold, with all the details laid bare for everyone to see. The idea struck me like a lightning bolt. I would throw a party. A gathering with all our friends, an event that seemed innocent and casual on the surface but would become the stage for the ultimate revelation. I wanted to confront Amanda and Mike in front of the people who knew us best, making it impossible for her to deny what was happening. This way, I could dismantle the world she had built with her lies without the chaos of an immediate confrontation. I spent the next few days meticulously planning every detail of the party. I chose a Saturday evening, giving our friends ample time to clear their schedules. I crafted the guest list carefully, ensuring that everyone we knew was invited, especially Mike. He needed to be there, caught in the web of deceit that I was about to weave. I wanted Amanda to feel the weight of her betrayal not just from me, but from our community, everyone she had lied to and manipulated. With the date set, I turned my attention to the logistics. I envisioned our cozy home filled with laughter, the scent of delicious food wafting through the air. I wanted the atmosphere to be vibrant and cheerful, a stark contrast to the storm brewing beneath the surface. I decided to prepare a spread of Amanda's favorite dishes, anything that would make the evening feel like a celebration of our life together. Even if it would soon become a stage for heartbreak, I sent out invitations under the guise of a casual get-together. Just a little reunion to catch up, I wrote, keeping the tone light and inviting. I wanted my guests to feel at ease, to walk into the night oblivious to the chaos that awaited. I communicated with friends, texting and calling to ensure everyone was excited about the gathering, all the while maintaining my facade of normalcy around Amanda. As the party approached, I focused on creating the perfect ambiance. I cleaned the house, rearranging furniture to facilitate mingling. I stocked up on drinks, making sure to have a selection that would appeal to everyone. I even curated a playlist filled with our favorite songs, a backdrop that would provide a false sense of nostalgia for the night ahead. The evening arrived, and I donned my best outfit, wanting to appear confident and composed. As our friends began to arrive, I welcomed them with warm smiles, serving drinks and engaging in light conversation. I played the role of the gracious host flawlessly, all the while my heart raced with the anticipation of what was to come. Throughout the night, laughter filled the air, and I watched as Amanda mingled with our friends, completely unaware of my plan. I noted how comfortable she seemed, and the way she laughed and interacted with Mike. Each glance exchanged between them felt like a dagger to my heart, but I remained focused. I had to keep my composure until the right moment arrived. Finally, I decided it was time to gather everyone's attention. I stood up and raised my glass, a signal for the room to quiet down. My heart pounded in my chest, but I pushed the nerves aside. "I'd like to propose a toast," I began, my voice steady, masking the turmoil within me. "To friendship, love, and honesty." As the party buzzed with laughter and chatter, the atmosphere felt almost electric. Friends were mingling, drinks were flowing, and for a brief moment, I allowed myself to forget the tumult of emotions that churned within me. But I knew that I couldn't postpone the moment any longer. It was time to unveil the truth, to lay bare the secrets that had been festering beneath the surface of my marriage. I stepped onto a small platform I had set up in the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. As I looked around at the smiling faces of our friends, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. They were completely unaware of the storm that was about to erupt. I took a deep breath, hoping to steady my nerves, and raised my glass to capture their attention. "Everyone, if I could have your attention for just a moment," I said, my voice cutting through the joyful noise. The room gradually quieted, curious faces turning toward me. "Thank you all for coming tonight. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces gathered together." I allowed a brief pause, letting my gaze sweep across the room, lingering for a moment on Amanda, who was beaming with joy, blissfully unaware of my intentions. As you all know, Amanda and I have been married for several years now. We've shared countless memories, celebrated milestones, and built a life that I thought was filled with love and trust. At that moment, I felt a wave of emotion wash over me, but I held it back, focusing on the task at hand. "But there's something that has been troubling me deeply, something that I feel you all should know." I kept my tone even and calm, purposefully avoiding any signs of anger or hurt. I wanted to control the narrative, to ensure that I was the one steering this conversation. I believe in honesty and transparency, especially in a marriage. And lately, I've come to realize that our relationship has not been as transparent as I thought. You see, there's been something happening behind the scenes, something that directly affects not only my life but also the lives of many of you in this room. I could see the curiosity mounting on the faces of our friends. Some exchanged glances, sensing the shift in tone. My heart raced, but I pressed on. Over the past few months, I've noticed some changes in Amanda. There were unexplained absences, strange behaviors, and a growing distance between us. Initially, I brushed it off as just the normal ebb and flow of marriage, but my instincts nagged at me, urging me to dig deeper. I paused, allowing the weight of my words to settle in. Eventually, my suspicions led me to discover something I never thought I would find. I found evidence that shattered my perception of our life together. Amanda has been seeing someone else. And I believe you all must know who that person is. I glanced at Mike, who stood awkwardly among our friends, and continued, that someone is our neighbor, Mike. The man who has shared countless barbecues with us, who has laughed with us, and who we considered a friend. I witnessed their betrayal firsthand, and it has left me with an ache that I can't adequately express. Gasps filled the room, and I could see the shock ripple across the faces of my friends. I noticed Amanda's eyes widen in disbelief, her expression shifting from confusion to panic. I kept my voice steady, determined to hold my ground. This is not just a personal betrayal, it's a betrayal of the trust that we all shared as friends. I felt it was essential for you all to know the truth, not just for me, but for the integrity of our relationships. The atmosphere shifted dramatically, the joyous energy of the party replaced by a tense silence. I want you all to understand the depth of this betrayal, I continued, my voice unwavering. Amanda and Mike's actions have not only hurt me but have also threatened the foundation of the friendships we've built over the years. I know that trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. I watched as the realization dawned on our friends. Some looked at Amanda with disappointment, others at Mike with a mix of confusion and anger. I felt a sense of vindication as their reactions validated my pain. I wanted to bring this to light tonight, in front of all of you, to ensure that everyone understands the gravity of what has happened. This isn't just about me, it's about all of us. The room was heavy with silence, each person grappling with the revelation. I could see Amanda's hands trembling as she struggled to find her voice, but I wasn't done yet. I know that this is a lot to process. You might be wondering how someone could betray a marriage, a friendship, and a community in such a profound way. And I wish I could provide answers, but the truth is, some things don't have a clear explanation. I allowed my gaze to linger on Amanda, her face a mix of anger, shame, and fear. Tonight was meant to be a celebration, but it has turned into something much darker. I want you all to remember this moment, the moment when honesty prevailed, even in the face of deep betrayal. I raised my glass once more, though this time it felt heavier in my hand. To truth, even when it's painful. May we always strive for honesty in our relationships, no matter how difficult it may be. As I lowered my glass, the atmosphere remained thick with tension. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone in the room. I knew that whatever happened next would alter the course of our relationship forever, but I was ready to face the consequences of my revelation. The truth was out, and there was no turning back now. The room was thick with tension, an almost palpable silence that felt suffocating. I could see the shock etched on the faces of our friends, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and confusion. But my gaze was firmly locked on Mike, who stood across the room, looking like a deer caught in headlights. The air crackled with unspoken words, and I could sense that this moment was about to shift dramatically. Mike, I began, my voice steady and unwavering, cutting through the oppressive silence. I know about your affair with Amanda. I watched as the color drained from his face, the realization of my knowledge hitting him like a freight train. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he just stood there, frozen, as the weight of the truth hung heavily in the air. Everyone here deserves to know the truth, I continued, my eyes never leaving his. You've betrayed not just me, but all of us. You've betrayed the trust that we've built as friends. I think it's time you stop pretending and face what you've done. The challenge in my tone was unmistakable, and I could feel the heat rising in my chest as I pressed on. As I spoke, I could see the gears turning in his mind. He glanced around the room, taking in the shocked faces of our friends, the disbelief written all over their features. Some looked at him with pity, while others were angry, their eyes narrowed with a mix of disappointment and betrayal. The atmosphere was charged, and I knew there was no escaping the consequences of his actions. Come on, Mike, I urged, my voice rising slightly. This isn't the time for excuses or lies. The truth is right in front of you, and we all know it. Just admit it. My heart raced as I watched him squirm, the pressure mounting on him in a way that was both satisfying and painful to witness. I felt like a hunter, cornering my prey, and I was not about to let him slip away. He took a deep breath, clearly struggling with the weight of my accusations. I didn't mean for this to happen, he finally managed to stammer, but I could hear the weakness in his voice. It was just a mistake. The words hung in the air, empty and hollow, and I could feel the frustration boiling within me. I wanted him to understand the gravity of his actions. To grasp how deeply he had hurt not just me but Amanda and our entire circle of friends. Just a mistake? I echoed incredulously, shaking my head in disbelief. You call sneaking around with my wife for months a mistake? You've torn apart our lives, and you think a simple admission will make it all okay? We are not just talking about a fleeting moment. This was a conscious choice you made repeatedly, and it's time you take responsibility for it. The tension in the room was palpable as Mike's shoulders slumped in resignation. He seemed to realize the futility of denying the truth any longer. I could see the gears turning in his mind, calculating the ramifications of his admission. Okay, fine, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. I was seeing Amanda. It just happened. With those words, a collective gasp echoed through the room, followed by a heavy silence that felt like a lead weight. The shock on our friends' faces was evident as they processed the weight of his confession. I felt a surge of triumph but also a wave of sadness wash over me. The reality of the situation was finally laid bare, and there was no turning back. It just happened? I repeated, almost incredulous. Is that all you have to say? Do you think that minimizes the pain you've caused? You've betrayed your friend and shattered the trust that we all built together. This isn't just a simple affair, it's a complete and utter destruction of our lives. Mike looked around, desperation creeping into his eyes as he sought understanding from our friends, perhaps hoping for sympathy or forgiveness. But all I saw reflected on him was disappointment and anger. I can't believe you would do this, Mike, one of our mutual friends finally spoke up, shaking his head in disbelief. You were part of our lives. We trusted you. I turned my gaze back to Mike, watching as the reality of his actions hit him squarely in the face. You've embarrassed Amanda, but you've also embarrassed all of us, I said, my voice steady yet laced with anger. You thought you could have your cake and eat it too. But it's time for you to face the consequences of your choices. The atmosphere shifted, and I could see some friends stepping back, their expressions a mix of disappointment and betrayal. I could sense a divide forming in the room, as people began to process the implications of Mike's confession. I felt a sense of vindication but also the deep sadness that came from witnessing the unraveling of so many connections. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of friendship, a time for us all to come together and enjoy each other's company. I continued, my voice rising. Instead, we're left picking up the pieces of shattered trust and broken relationships. I stepped forward, closing the distance between myself and Mike, my voice firm. You need to understand that your actions have repercussions. You've not only betrayed me but also our friends. How can any of us ever trust you again? He looked at me, the weight of my words sinking in. I'm sorry, he said, but the sincerity felt hollow, lacking the depth of remorse that the situation demanded. I never wanted to hurt you. No, Mike, I replied, shaking my head. You may not have wanted to hurt me, but you did. And it's time for you to face that. You can't just walk away from this, hoping it will fade into the background. This is a moment of reckoning for all of us. As the reality of the situation sank in, the murmurs in the room began to shift, the unity of our friendships fraying at the edges. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on us all, and I knew that the path forward would be rocky, filled with uncertainty and pain. Everyone deserves honesty, I said, looking around the room, my heart heavy. And tonight, we've finally confronted the truth. It's a painful truth, but it's one we must face together. I hope we can find a way to heal from this, even if it feels impossible right now. Mike stood there, looking small and defeated as he absorbed the weight of his confession and the fallout from it. I could feel the eyes of our friends on him, some with pity, others with anger. And I knew that whatever happened next would change our friendship forever. That evening was etched into my memory as one of the darkest moments of my life. What had started as a celebration among friends had spiraled into a chaotic unraveling of trust and betrayal. The air felt thick with a mixture of shock, grief, and a profound sense of loss. I looked around the room, taking in the faces of our friends, their expressions a collage of disbelief and confusion, mirroring the turmoil that raged within me. As the weight of Mike's confession settled in, Amanda stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. The woman I once adored now seemed like a stranger, her sorrow a physical manifestation of the pain we had both caused. I watched as she frantically wiped her eyes, her attempts to maintain her composure faltering with each passing second. I felt a twinge of empathy for her, but it was quickly overshadowed by the anger and betrayal that surged through me. "Why, Amanda?" I finally asked, my voice cutting through the silence. The question hung in the air, heavy and laden with the implications of what we had lost. She looked at me, her eyes filled with regret, but words failed her. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The weight of her guilt was evident, and I could see the inner turmoil reflected in her expression. "Did any of it mean anything to you?" I pressed, unable to contain the anguish that clawed at my insides. "Did our marriage, our life together, mean so little that you could throw it all away for a fleeting affair?" My words were sharp, laced with the bitterness of betrayal, and I could see her flinch as they struck home. Amid our painful exchange, I noticed Mike slipping away from the gathering, his shoulders hunched as he walked toward the door. There was no grand exit, no dramatic farewell. He simply faded into the night, leaving behind the wreckage he had created. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and disappointment at his departure. Part of me wished he dared to face the consequences of his actions fully, but another part was relieved that I wouldn't have to confront him again. As I turned my attention back to Amanda, I felt a deep ache in my chest, one that threatened to consume me. "You betrayed me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The finality of those words hung in the air, a damning indictment of everything we had built together. "You didn't just betray me, you betrayed our friends, our life, and everything we stood for." Her sobs echoed in the room, a haunting reminder of the love that had once flourished between us. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her that everything would be okay. But how could I? How could I offer solace when my own heart was breaking? I felt lost in a sea of emotions, anger battling with the remnants of love I still held for her. Our friends stood in shock, unsure of how to navigate the emotional fallout. Some exchanged concerned glances, while others seemed at a loss for words. The intimacy of our friendships had been shattered, and I could feel the chasm widening between us. They had come to celebrate, but now they were left grappling with the reality of betrayal that had unfolded before their eyes. After what felt like an eternity of silence, I turned away from Amanda, unable to bear the sight of her despair any longer. I moved to the kitchen, seeking a moment of reprieve from the emotional chaos surrounding me. I poured myself a drink, hoping to drown the pain that had become a constant companion. But no amount of alcohol could wash away the bitter taste of betrayal that lingered in my mouth. The sound of muffled sobs pulled me back to the living room, where Amanda was still crying. Her anguish palpable. I couldn't bear to see her in such pain, but I also couldn't pretend that everything would go back to normal. Our marriage had been irrevocably altered, the foundation we had built crumbling beneath us. In the days that followed, the reality of our situation began to sink in. Amanda and I barely spoke, our once vibrant communication replaced by an oppressive silence that felt like a weight on my chest. The moments we had shared, the laughter and love, seemed like distant memories tainted by the betrayal that had shattered our bond. Eventually, I made the decision that had been brewing in my mind since that fateful night. I would file for divorce. It was a painful choice, one that I had hoped to avoid, but I knew deep down that there was no way to rebuild what had been lost. The trust had been shattered beyond repair, and I couldn't envision a future with someone who had chosen to betray me so deeply. As I sat at the kitchen table, pen in hand, preparing to sign the papers, a wave of sadness washed over me. I thought of the life we had built together, the dreams we had shared, and the love that had once felt unshakable. It was hard to reconcile the joy we had experienced with the reality of our situation. I felt like I was mourning not just the end of a marriage but the loss of a part of myself. When I finally delivered the divorce papers to Amanda, the look in her eyes was one of defeat and resignation. We both knew that our marriage was over, and as much as I had wanted to believe that we could overcome the betrayal, the reality was too painful to ignore. There was an unspoken understanding between us as I handed her the papers, a shared acknowledgement of the love that had been lost, replaced by an insurmountable chasm of hurt. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life, one day at a time. I leaned on friends who had supported me through the turmoil, finding solace in their company. The road to healing was long and winding, but I knew that I had to keep moving forward. I learned to embrace the pain as part of my journey, recognizing that while I couldn't change the past, I could shape my future. As for Amanda and Mike, I would eventually come to terms with their choices, but the scars of betrayal would always remain. I hoped they would find their path to healing, just as I was learning to do. The experience changed me irrevocably, teaching me about resilience, trust, and the importance of honesty in all relationships. In the end, I realized that I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. I had faced the darkest moment of my life and emerged on the other side, ready to embrace whatever the future held. While I would always carry the memories of what we had lost, I was determined to forge a new path, one filled with hope and the possibility of love once more. As time passed, I found myself slowly navigating through the aftermath of the chaos that had engulfed my life. The ache of betrayal, once all-consuming, began to dull into a more manageable throb. Each day, I made a conscious effort to focus on the small moments that brought me joy, whether it was the warmth of the sun on my face during a morning walk or the laughter shared with friends over dinner. I immersed myself in new hobbies, rediscovering passions that had lain dormant during my marriage. With each step forward, I felt the weight of resentment and anger begin to lift, replaced by a growing sense of peace. Gradually, I learned to let go of the bitterness that had clung to my heart like a shadow. I realized that holding onto the pain only served to anchor me to the past, preventing me from embracing the present. I started to view my experience not just as a loss but as a lesson in resilience and self-discovery. Forgiveness, I found, was not about absolving others of their mistakes, it was about freeing myself from the burden of hurt. In that liberation, I discovered a newfound strength, and with it, the capacity to love again, both myself and others, unencumbered by the ghosts of my past.